Emily sat quietly by the rain-speckled window, the soft gray light of a late afternoon filling her small apartment. Outside, the world seemed to move with a hurried rhythm, people rushing home with umbrellas, cars splashing through puddles, but inside, everything felt still, suspended. She traced patterns on the condensation forming on the glass, her mind wandering to thoughts she didn't share with anyone. It wasn't loneliness, exactly. She had friends, a steady job, and a life that many would call comfortable. But there was a quiet ache she couldn't name, a yearning that lingered like a shadow in the corners of her heart. It was the kind of feeling that made her pause when she heard laughter echoing from a nearby cafe, or when she saw couples walking hand in hand through the park. It wasn't bitterness, just a sense of being on the outside of something beautiful she wanted but didn't yet have. She took a sip of her tea, letting the warmth fill her chest. The smell of chamomile mixed with the faint scent of rain, creating a strangely comforting bubble around her. Emily's life was full of routines and responsibilities, yet somehow her heart longed for something more. Not dramatic or extravagant, just connection. Someone who understood the quiet moments and the small joys. The kind of understanding that didn't require words. Her phone buzzed on the table, breaking the calm with a gentle vibration. She glanced at it and saw a message notification. It was from Mark. Her chest tightened for reasons she couldn't quite explain. Mark wasn't a new face in her life. In fact, they had known each other for years. But there was always a distance, a kind of unspoken hesitation that neither of them had crossed. "Can we talk?" The message read, "I think I need to explain a few things." Emily stared at the words. Her first instinct was to respond immediately, to let curiosity and hope push her fingers across the keyboard. But she paused. Something inside her whispered to wait, to let the moment breathe. She wasn't sure why, only that she felt the weight of this message, an invisible pull that made her aware of how much silence could mean. Mark had always been kind, thoughtful, and unexpectedly attentive in ways that made her heart skip a beat. But life had a way of keeping them apart. Misunderstandings, timing, and unspoken feelings had created an invisible wall between them. And now, months later, here he was, reaching out, as if the universe had nudged them toward a crossroads. Emily looked around her apartment, at the neat stack of books on her coffee table, the soft throw blanket draped over the couch, and the single potted plant that stubbornly survived in the corner. Everything was ordinary, yet the ordinary suddenly felt fragile, like the quiet before something significant happened. The rain outside slowed, tapping lightly against the window pane, as if the world itself was waiting for her next move. She remembered the first time she noticed Mark, not in a dramatic way, but in a moment of quiet significance. It was at a work event months ago, a simple conversation about a book they both loved. A shared laugh that lingered longer than necessary. Since then, she had replayed those moments in her mind, imagining what might have been, imagining what could be. But she never acted, never spoke her true feelings. Silence had been her shield, her way of keeping her emotions intact. Now, with his message glowing on her phone, that silence felt different. It was heavy with possibility. Emily didn't want to rush it. She wanted to understand it, to feel it, to see where this path might lead without losing herself along the way. She wrapped her hands around her mug, feeling the warmth seep through her fingers, and allowed herself a small, hopeful smile. She didn't know what Mark wanted to say, or how it might change everything. But she did know that sometimes waiting was part of the journey, the part where the heart learned to listen, to watch, and to understand before it leaped. The rain outside began to fade into a soft drizzle, and Emily felt a strange calm settle over her. For the first time in months, maybe even years, she felt a mix of anticipation and peace. Something was about to shift, and although she couldn't see the outcome, she was ready to be present for it. Her fingers hovered over her phone, yet she didn't touch it. She didn't need to respond just yet. The silence was hers, and in that silence she found clarity. In that quiet, she realized that sometimes the most powerful moments were not the ones spoken aloud. They were the ones felt deeply, quietly, and with intention. Emily leaned back against the window, listening to the last few drops of rain slide down the glass. She didn't respond. She simply waited. And in that waiting, her heart began to open, curious and hopeful. Ready for whatever was about to arrive, the message from Mark wasn't just words, it was a doorway. And Emily, for the first time, felt ready to step through it. Emily sat in the quiet of her apartment, the soft glow of the evening lamp illuminating the familiar corners of her room. Her phone still rested on the table, Mark's message unread, yet it lingered in her thoughts like a delicate melody. She closed her eyes and let her mind drift back to the beginning, the moments that had quietly shaped the bond between them. It started in college, during those long afternoons in the library where she and Mark would sit across from each other, quietly working yet sharing the same space. Emily remembered how he would glance up from his notes, catching her eye for just a second, offering a small, warm smile that made her chest flutter without her even realizing it. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic declarations, just tiny moments of attention that somehow felt monumental. She remembered one rainy day when they had been trapped in the library after classes ended. The storm outside was fierce, drumming against the windows, but inside the room felt cozy, almost magical. They shared an umbrella on the walk back to their dorms, laughing at how awkwardly they squeezed under it. Emily had felt a strange, unspoken closeness that day. A connection that didn't need words but spoke volumes in glances and laughter. Over time, they built a rhythm, a quiet companionship. They studied together, grabbed coffee between classes, and sometimes just sat on a park bench in the late afternoon, talking about books, dreams, and small everyday things. These moments, ordinary to an outsider, had become the foundation of a bond that was more subtle than romantic gestures, more tender than declarations. Yet, as much as Emily had cherished those times, there had always been an invisible barrier between them. Perhaps it was timing, or perhaps it was fear. The fear of ruining what they already had, of stepping into something uncertain. She had watched him from afar at times, noticed the way he laughed with friends, or how his eyes lit up when he talked about things he loved. There had been longing, yes, but it had been wrapped in patience, wrapped in respect for the connection they already shared. One memory stood out more vividly than the others. It was during a campus festival, under strings of lights that flickered like stars. Emily had been helping at one of the booths, and Mark had shown up unexpectedly, carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate. "Thought you might need this," he had said, his voice soft, his smile gentle. They had wandered through the festival together, not speaking much, just letting the night envelop them. But she remembered the feeling of walking side by side, a sense of belonging she hadn't experienced before. That night their hands had brushed accidentally, and Emily remembered the flutter in her chest, the unspoken acknowledgement that something deeper existed between them. And yet, life had pulled them in different directions. Mark had accepted a summer internship in another state. Emily had stayed behind to focus on her studies and part-time job. They had tried to keep in touch, but the conversations had grown sparse, replaced by polite messages that never captured the intimacy of their earlier connection. Each time she had felt her heart reach for him. Circumstances had reminded her that distance and timing were often cruel companions. Even now, years later, those memories lingered. They weren't bittersweet. They were precious. They were a reminder of a connection that had always existed, quietly waiting to be recognized. Like a small seed beneath the snow, patient and resilient. Emily realized that those early moments had shaped the person she had become, someone who understood the value of silence, of observation, and of holding on to meaningful connections. Even if unspoken, Mark had been part of her world in ways she had never fully acknowledged. The way he remembered small details, the way he listened without judgment, and the way he made ordinary moments feel extraordinary, all of it had left an imprint on her heart. And yet, she had never expressed what she felt, fearing that words might ruin what already existed between them. As she sat in her apartment, Emily allowed herself to feel the nostalgia, fully the laughter, the shared secrets, the quiet moments of understanding. It was a gentle ache, one that reminded her that love wasn't always about grand declarations or dramatic gestures. Sometimes it was about the little things, the small touches that lingered in memory long after the moment had passed. The message from Mark had reopened the door to those memories, and with it, a sense of hope that something long awaited might finally unfold. She understood now why the silence had mattered. It wasn't emptiness, it was a space to recognize the depth of their bond, to appreciate the moments they had shared, and to prepare her heart for what might come. Emily picked up her cup of tea again, feeling the warmth seep into her palms, and let her thoughts rest on Mark. She realized that connectio. The morning sunlight streamed softly through the cafe window, dust motes dancing in the warm golden light. Emily sat at her usual table, a small corner by the window where she could watch the world without feeling part of it. Her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, the aroma comforting, familiar, grounding her. Today felt ordinary. Yet something in the air hinted that it might not stay that way. She had almost forgotten about Mark's message. The words lingered in her mind, a quiet echo she couldn't shake. "Can we talk? I think I need to explain a few things." Weeks had passed since he had sent it, and she had done nothing refused to respond, choosing silence instead. But now, with her thoughts wandering back to their shared past, her curiosity was rekindled. She wondered what had prompted him to reach out after all this time. The cafe door jingled, and Emily's gaze drifted upward. A familiar figure stepped in, shaking raindrops from his coat despite the sun now streaming through the windows. Her heart skipped not wildly, but enough to make her aware of her own pulse. Mark. He moved with a casual ease, scanning the cafe, and then paused as his eyes met hers. There was a moment of hesitation, a flicker of recognition and surprise, before his lips curved into a gentle smile. Emily felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, anticipation, and the quiet thrill of something unspoken yet deeply familiar. "Emily," he said softly, almost as if testing whether this was really her. His voice carried the warmth she remembered, calm and patient. The same voice that had lingered in her thoughts over the years. "Mark," she replied, her voice steady, though her chest felt lighter and heavier at the same time. The years of separation, the distance, the missed opportunities, they all seemed to collapse into that single moment. He approached and sat across from her, careful to keep a respectful distance. There was an unspoken acknowledgement that this meeting was delicate, precious, and that the past needed space to unfold before words could fill it. "I didn't expect to see you here," Emily said, her fingers curling around the edge of her cup. "I mean, it's been a long time." Mark nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "It has. I wasn't sure if I should reach out, honestly. But I couldn't leave things as they were. I've thought about you more than I realized, more than I ever admitted to anyone." Emily felt a quiet warmth in her chest. His words weren't dramatic declarations, they didn't need to be. They carried honesty, the kind that only time and distance could shape. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she let the silence between them speak, allowing the years of unspoken feelings to breathe as they sipped their coffee. Memories seemed to float between them, delicate and vivid. She remembered the quiet afternoons in the library, the shared walks through the park, the accidental touches and lingering glances. Each memory felt alive again, stronger than it had in years. Mark leaned back slightly, studying her with a look of gentle curiosity. "I've missed this," he admitted. "I've missed us, the way we could just be together without forcing anything. I didn't realize how much until now." Emily's lips curved into a small, reflective smile. She could feel her own longing reflected in his words, the same quiet ache she had carried for so long. She had learned to live with it, to tuck it away safely, but now it stirred again, like a dormant fire awakened by a single spark. "I've thought about it too," she said finally, her voice soft but certain. "I didn't respond to your message. Not because I didn't care. I just needed to understand what I was feeling before I could say anything." Mark nodded, his eyes attentive, patient. "I understand. Silence doesn't mean you don't care. Sometimes it means you're listening, thinking, figuring things out. There was a pause, but it didn't feel awkward. It felt intentional, a space where emotions could settle and breathe. And in that space, the connection between them years in the making became tangible again. The warmth, the familiarity, the quiet depth of their bond filled the table between them like an invisible bridge reconnecting. Two hearts that had been patient for this exact moment. A soft laugh escaped Emily as she recalled a memory from years ago. A joke shared in the library that neither of them had stopped laughing about. Mark's eyes lit up in recognition, and for a moment, it was as if no time had passed at all. It was fate, or maybe coincidence, that had brought them together again. A simple cafe, a familiar table, the ordinary flow of life. In that ordinary moment, everything felt extraordinary. The twist of the present, the sudden nearness of someone who had always mattered, was enough to make Emily realize how strong her feelings still were, and how fragile yet resilient the bond between them had remained as they continued to talk. Their conversation gentle and unhurried. Emily understood something profound. Feelings don't always vanish with distance or time. They can lie dormant, waiting for the right moment, the right person, the quiet nudge that brings them back into focus. And sometimes, that moment arrives when you least expect it, but when you're ready to truly see it. The cafe around them buzzed with life. Yet they were in a world of their own making. And in that space, Emily felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Hope. Hope not just for answers, but for the possibility of what could grow from years of shared memories, unspoken feelings, and patient waiting. Mark reached across the table, his hand hovering just above hers. Emily didn't pull away, but she didn't speak either. Words weren't necessary yet. The present had opened a door, and both of them stood on the threshold. Hearts aligned in quiet anticipation. Sometimes, she realized, it takes a small twist of fate to remind you of the love that's always been there, quietly waiting to be recognized. And in that gentle, unexpected way, Emily's heart began to feel alive again, ready for whatever the next chapter would bring. The late afternoon sunlight spilled softly into the small cafe, casting warm golden shadows across the wooden table. Emily stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, watching the steam curl up and vanish into the air. Across from her, Mark watched her too, his expression unreadable yet filled with a quiet intensity. Neither of them spoke immediately. The air between them carried the weight of years of memories, unspoken words and feelings neither had dared to fully voice. Emily felt her heart tighten in a familiar way. It was the same feeling she had experienced during their college days, hope tangled with hesitation, longing wrapped in uncertainty. She wanted to speak, to tell him everything she had felt, but the words seemed fragile, as if saying them aloud might shatter them. Mark cleared his throat softly. "Emily, I've been thinking about this, about us, for a long time," he said carefully, as if measuring each word. "I don't know if I ever told you everything I felt back then. I'm not sure I could have." Emily's chest swelled with a mix of relief and lingering tension. Relief because he was finally acknowledging what they had both felt. Tension because her own emotions were still tangled, raw, and unfamiliar after all these years. She didn't respond immediately, letting the silence stretch. "I remember," he continued, his gaze dropping to the table before returning to hers. "All the little moments that seemed so ordinary, but they weren't ordinary to me. Every time we laughed, every time our hands accidentally touched, I felt something I didn't fully understand at the time." Emily swallowed, her fingers tightening around her coffee cup. She remembered those moments vividly, the shared glances in the library, the quiet walks through the park, the evenings spent talking about dreams, books, and life. Each memory had left an imprint on her heart, shaping her in ways she hadn't realized. "I felt the same," she admitted softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know if I should say anything. I didn't want to risk what we already had." Her eyes met his, and she saw the reflection of her own hesitation mirrored in his gaze. Mark nodded, a small, wistful smile appearing. I understand. I think. We were both afraid. Afraid of losing what was already special. Afraid that speaking too soon would change everything. The words hung between them, delicate yet profound. Emily felt a warmth spreading through her chest, a mixture of comfort and longing. It was as though the years of silence, the distance, and the missed opportunities had led them to this exact moment one, where honesty could finally take shape without fear. They sat together, neither rushing, neither pressing, letting the quiet carry the weight of what they couldn't yet say. It was in the pauses, the small shifts in posture, the lingering glances, and the gentle brush of a hand against the edge of the table. Every subtle detail spoke volumes, echoing the feelings that had remained unspoken for so long. I kept thinking about what might have been, Mark said finally, his voice steady, though tinged with vulnerability. I'd see you in my thoughts and wonder if you felt the same. I never wanted to push, but I always hoped that somehow, one day, we'd find each other again. Emily's lips curved into a small, bittersweet smile. She had thought the same countless times, imagining scenarios where courage would replace hesitation. Yet here he was, sitting across from her, showing the same patience and understanding he had always carried. I think I've waited for this moment, she admitted, her voice trembling slightly, not just for what you would say, but for the courage to finally hear it without fear. Mark leaned back slightly, a reflective look in his eyes. It's strange, isn't it? How silence can carry. The sky outside had begun to darken into a soft twilight, casting long shadows across the cafe floor. Emily and Mark still sat together, their drinks forgotten. The table, a quiet witness to a conversation unspoken yet profoundly felt. The day had moved slowly around them. But in that small corner, time seemed to stretch and fold, carrying them into a space all their own. Emily's hands rested lightly on the table, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. Her mind was full of memories, of moments that had shaped her heart over the years. She had loved him quietly, patiently, never daring to disturb the fragile balance between them. And now seeing him here so close, so present, made it impossible to hold back the truth any longer. Mark spoke softly, almost hesitantly. Emily, I've been carrying something for a long time. Something I should have said years ago, but I didn't. Because I was afraid. Emily looked up, her heart catching in her chest. The familiar ache of longing rose again, but this time it was mixed with courage. She had spent years waiting for this honesty, waiting for someone to finally voice what her own heart had whispered for so long. You don't have to say it if you're not ready, she said gently, her voice calm but firm, a soft invitation rather than a demand. Mark shook his head, his expression, earnest eyes locked on hers. No, I do. I can't let this go without saying it. Emily, I care about you. I've cared for so long, quietly, maybe foolishly. But it's true, and I can't ignore it anymore. I don't want to. Emily felt a surge of emotion, a mix of relief, hope, and the thrill of long-awaited acknowledgement. The words she had imagined, the confessions she had replayed in her mind countless times, were finally spoken aloud. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she let the weight of his honesty settle, feeling it touch the deepest part of her heart. Mark, she began softly, her voice trembling with both vulnerability and strength. I've waited for this too. I didn't respond to your message. Not because I didn't care, but because I needed to be sure of what I felt and what we could be. I've carried the same feelings for you all this time. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The cafe around them faded into a blur, replaced by the quiet intensity of shared emotions. Their hands hovered over the table, almost touching, as if the space between them had grown charged with years of longing and unspoken truth. I was afraid, Mark admitted, his voice barely above a whisper, that if I said anything, it might ruin everything we had, or that you wouldn't feel the same. But now I know. I can't live with the regret of never telling you how I feel. Emily's eyes filled with a soft, shimmering light. She reached across the table slowly, her hand finally brushing against his. The contact was gentle, tentative, yet it carried the weight of years of emotions held in quiet patience. The touch wasn't bold or dramatic, it was intimate in its simplicity, a signal that hearts had aligned. "I understand," she whispered, her thumb lightly grazing the back of his hand. "I was afraid to. Afraid that if I spoke, it might change everything. But now, I realize that we can't be afraid of what's real." Mark's lips curved into a small, relieved smile. "I think I've been waiting for this moment without even knowing it. Waiting for the courage to speak, for the honesty that matters most. And now that it's here, I feel lighter, like a weight has lifted." Emily's chest swelled with a mix of happiness and vulnerability. She felt the years of longing, the quiet ache of unspoken words, the patient hope all converging into this single extraordinary moment. The turning point was not sudden or dramatic in action, but in emotion, in acknowledgement, in the courage to finally let truth speak where silence had reigned. They sat together, hands lightly touching, eyes locked, and hearts quietly aligned. The words had been spoken, the truth laid bare. Yet there was no rush, no need for grand gestures. The turning point was in the understanding, the recognition that love, patient and enduring, had finally found its voice, I think. "We've been given another chance," Emily said softly, a gentle smile tugging at her lips. "A chance to be honest, to be present, and to see where this can go together." Mark nodded, a warmth spreading through his chest as he absorbed her words. "Yes, together. And I promise, I won't take this for granted. I won't let fear or hesitation hold us back again." In that quiet moment, surrounded by the ordinary hum of the cafe, Emily and Mark discovered something extraordinary. They had faced the weight of years of silence, the longing and hesitation that had kept them apart, and now the truth had brought them together. The turning point wasn't in grand gestures or dramatic declarations, it was in the courage to speak, to feel, and to finally let the heart lead the way. And as the twilight deepened outside, painting the world in soft shades of orange and purple, Emily felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. Hope had returned. Longing had found its home, and the unspoken truth, finally voiced, had opened the door to something beautiful, tender, and enduring. The evening air was cool and soft as Emily and Mark stepped out of the cafe. The city bathed in the gentle glow of streetlights. The world around them felt alive yet calm, as if it had been waiting for this precise moment, the moment when years of unspoken words and patient longing could finally breathe freely. Emily glanced at Mark, her heart swelling with a quiet joy she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. His presence was steady and familiar, yet every detail of him, the way he smiled, the way his eyes held warmth, the subtle movements she had missed felt new. It was the kind of realization that made the ordinary extraordinary. The simple act of walking beside someone infused with meaning and hope. "I can't believe it's finally like this," Emily said softly, her voice full of wonder and reflection. "All these years. It feels like we've been waiting for this moment without even knowing it." Mark smiled, a mixture of relief and tenderness in his expression. "I think we have. I've always known there was something between us, something worth waiting for. And now, standing here, I understand why patience mattered. It's made this real and grounded and worth everything." They walked slowly, side by side, their steps echoing softly against the cobblestone street. The city buzzed around them, but the world they shared was theirs alone. The gentle rhythm of their pace mirrored the new, steady cadence of their hearts, hearts no longer burdened by silence or uncertainty. "You know," Emily began, glancing up at the glowing windows of nearby buildings, "I used to imagine moments like this in my mind. Quiet walks, small conversations, the feeling of finally being seen. But I never imagined it would feel this complete." Mark nodded, his hand brushing lightly against hers, not intentionally romantic, but tender in its presence, a gentle acknowledgement of the bond they shared. "It's more than I imagined, too. I always hoped we'd get here someday. but now experiencing it. It's better than I ever imagined. Better because it's real. For a while, they walked in comfortable silence, letting the moment stretch. There were no dramatic declarations or rushed promises. Only the quiet certainty that they had finally arrived at a point where honesty and connection could flourish. Every glance, every soft smile carried the weight of years of longing. And yet it was lightened by the joy of the present. Emily stopped at a small park bench, the soft grass brushing her shoes. She sat down and Mark followed, leaving a respectful distance but close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. The night was serene, the stars beginning to peek through the fading light. And Emily felt a sense of peace wash over her. "I think this is how love should feel," she said after a pause, her voice gentle but confident. Not rushed, not forced, just honest, patient, and growing naturally. "I've waited so long for this, and now it's here, quietly and fully." Mark looked at her, a reflective smile on his face. "I feel the same. We've had time to understand ourselves, to understand each other. And now I think we're ready not just for the feeling, but for everything that comes with it. Friendship, trust, care, all the things that make love last." They sat together, hands resting near each other, a gentle warmth in their proximity. There was no need to speak every thought, every feeling. They could feel it in the quiet shared moments, in the depth of connection that had endured years of separation and silence. Emily tilted her head slightly, smiling at him. "I'm glad we waited. I think it made us stronger and more certain. And I think that's what love should be. Something worth waiting for. Something that grows deeper over time." Mark reached out and lightly clasped her hand. Not in haste, but in a quiet, intentional gesture that said everything words could not. "I promise to keep it that way. To be patient, to be present, and to never take this for granted. What we have, it's rare, and I'll treasure it." Emily's eyes glistened, the softest tears of joy forming. She felt the years of longing, the silent dreams, the patient hope all converge in this moment. "I'll treasure it too," she whispered. "Every moment, every quiet gesture, every word and pause. This us. It's perfect because it's real." They stayed on the bench for a while, simply holding hands, watching the night deepen around them. The world moved on, lights flickered, people passed. But Emily and Mark existed in their own space, a space built from patience, understanding, and the quiet strength of hearts that had waited and hoped. Eventually, they rose, still side by side, stepping into the calm night. The city lights reflected softly in their eyes, and